South Africa's president defiant as the ruling party moves to force him out. How will the ANC handle the transition? I'm Imran Gata, and today's newsmaker is Jacob Zuma. He's led South Africa for a decade, but now his own party wants President Jacob Zuma gone. When the ANC elected a new party leader in Cyril Ramaphosa last year, there were hopes he would take over the country's presidency and begin a new era for South Africa. But that hasn't happened as soon as many would have liked. Since the December vote, Jacob Zuma has continued to resist calls to resign. But now Parliament is set to take matters into its own hands by using a no-confidence motion to vote Zuma out. The president maintains he's still done nothing wrong. For more, here's Shoaib Hassan.
Jacob Zuma has been the most powerful man in South Africa. But now he may have to go.
In his wisdom, the NEC decided as follows. 1, to recall his deployee, Comrade Jacob Zuma, in accordance with Rule 12.2, Rule 12.2, 21.2 of the ANC Constitution, which accords the NEC the authority to recall his deployees.
Zuma says he will abide by the party's decision to recall him, but he's been reluctant to step down immediately.
There's nothing I've done wrong.
Now, in response,
proceed with the motion of no confidence.
The ANC says they'll use a vote of no confidence in Parliament to oust him. The ongoing corruption inquiry involving Zuma and one of South Africa's richest families, the Guptas, has gathered strength. A day after the ANC decision to remove Zuma, police raided the Gupta family home as part of an investigation into corruption and influence peddling. Ajay, Atul and Rajesh Gupta moved from India to South Africa in 1993. Atul Gupta set up their first business, Sahara Computers, in 1997, which now has an annual turnover of $22 million. A South African wealth listing has Atul Gupta valued at $773 million. The Gupta's business interests now include air travel, energy, technology, weapons manufacturing, and media. Their main company, Oak-based directors, have included Zuma's son and daughter, Dudu Zane and Dudu Zile. Both resigned after financial connections between Zuma and the Guptas were uncovered. The Gupta Gate scandal has also involved the use of a South African Air Force base to fly in wedding guests, and the UK-based PR firm Bell Pottinger to spread propaganda on social media, claiming corruption allegations against the Guptas were a campaign by the so-called white monopoly capital. Such incidents have enraged ordinary South Africans, especially in the face of a faltering economy, and seem to have been the undoing of Jacob Zuma.
Nelson Mandela was totally committed against corruption, against theft, against the robbery of the assets of our people. We will continue with this legacy of fighting corruption and making sure that those who are corrupt and steal from the poor are brought to justice.
Now that Zuma's time at the helm may be up, where will it leave the country's ruling party and the South African people? Shoaib Hassan, the newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from Cape Town by Ibrahim Rasool. He's the former South African ambassador to the US and was the premier of the Western Cape. And from Johannesburg, we have political analyst Oliver Dixon. Gentlemen, great to have you on the newsmakers. I regret to inform you both that we had Zwanele Jimimani booked for the show. He pulled out just a few minutes ago. I was looking forward to him having a dialogue with the two of you gentlemen. Of course, he's a close Zuma and Gupta ally as well. Big news for the country. It's been a fascinating few days. Ibrahim Rasool, tell me why President Jacob Zuma has not decided to go along with the party's wishes?
Look, I think that it is an enormous day. I think that he woke up this morning not only with the recall letter in hand asking him to resign by the African National Congress, but he also woke up to the news that the Gupta home had been raided, that Ajay Gupta had been taken in for questioning or arrested. And so I think that the stakes are really great for someone like him. He would want 3 to 6 months, as he has asked, to, I think, smooth over things, maybe get the nuclear deal off the ground, maybe ensure that evidence is not available, and so forth. And I think that he may be surprised by the usually overcautious ANC. He may be surprised by the fact that it is moving so decisively.
Okay, that's really interesting. Oliver, do you agree with that, that perhaps there's some method behind the madness right now? He needs 3 to 6 months to sort things out, because it might actually be more than him just needing to resign, but he might actually face legal trouble.
Right. So I think Ibrahim Rasool is well within his right to speculate what the reasons may be for Jacob Zuma wanting to linger on a bit longer. And we have very little information, so I guess we're all going to have to speculate as far and as best as we possibly can and anchor it in some sort of fact somewhere. But I think what Jacob Zuma asked for seems reasonable, and he and Cyril Ramaphosa had a principled agreement that what he had asked for was a reasonable request, and that they would execute it as that. Cyril Ramaphosa received excess pressure from not only his NEC internally, but various factors in the media, various international investors who we would have spoken to in Davos in Switzerland at the World Economic Forum a few weeks ago. So that would have mounted a bit more pressure into cutting down the time for Jacob Zuma, and would have put a halt on the principled agreement that Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa had. And I think it's important to consider that. But I do think legal action may become an option to Jacob Zuma, if he were to consider it. But I don't think he's got much grounds for that, because what they would pursue would be Section 89 of the Constitution or Section 102 of the Constitution, which are well within the right of Parliament to ensue at any given time they feel pleased to do so. And I don't think, he would successfully be able to challenge that in the High Court, nevertheless in the Constitutional Court.
Okay, I want to get Ibrahim to respond to that, but I want him to respond after we listen to Jacob Zuma. This is him giving an interview to, well, I don't know if it was an interview. It was a speech. There weren't too many questions. This was to the SABC, South Africa State Broadcaster. Have a little listen.
What have I done in this kind of situation? Because the system, the policy, nothing has interfered. What I even asked, what is this hurry? What are you rushing for?
Okay, so Ibrahim, what are you rushing for? What have I done wrong? Is this a man who's actually delusional with no self-awareness, or does he have a point? And maybe, okay, so the party has replaced the leadership. That's fine. There's an election coming next year. Why is everybody in such a big rush to get rid of Jacob Zuma? Why not let him serve his term and, as expected, have Cyril Ramaphosa become the president when, as expected, the ANC will probably win in the next election?
Look, I think that what you're dealing with is an ANC that feels liberated. I think over this dark decade of Jacob Zuma's presidency, in the first term of his, he had charmed the pants off those who were elected with him at Polokwane and governed with him. I think that as that term went on and he went to his second term, there were serious misgivings about whether this man's intentions were honest, whether his actions were honest, and whether he should be the president. And then opposition started mounting. Towards the conference in Nasrec in December last year, suddenly they saw that there was a critical mass of people who opposed Jacob Zuma. He had embarrassed the party, that we lost the metros in South Africa, we could lose the 2019 elections as the African National Congress, and that for the first time, the ANC has not for the first time been in political or organizational crises, but for the first time the ANC found itself in a deep moral crisis. And this was unsustainable to veterans of the movement as well as members of the movement. And so the question is, how soon can we get this man's hand off power, and how can we make sure that the country is not going to be subjected to too much time with him at the helm for him to push through nuclear deals and maybe even embark on a scorched earth policy with the resources of the state.
Yeah, and of course, I don't want to sort of go down a rabbit hole, but the nuclear deal that you're referring to, for the sake of our viewers, involves the Russians, and the opposition to it is that it's wasting too much of South African taxpayer money. Oliver, Ibrahim's talking about the fact that the party feels they need to clean house, right? They need to sort themselves out because the writing is on the wall under Jacob Zuma, and that's why they need to expedite this process. So is that reasonable then to think that this is why they're rushing, and this is why they want to get Cyril Ramaphosa in the hot seat as quickly as possible in order to sort it out?
Let's be honest here. If the ANC was serious about, cleaning out, Jacob Zuma wouldn't be the only official they would be getting rid of. Because if it's true that he is corrupt and has been corrupt, he certainly wasn't corrupt alone. He certainly would have had ministers, director generals, deputy director generals, perhaps even deputy ministers as his accomplices throughout his criminal network. So getting rid of Jacob Zuma is not really restoring the moral crisis Ibrahim describes the ANC to be in. So I don't think the ANC is genuine about cleaning out. What I do think, however, is happening is just a natural process of wanting to consolidate power as quickly as possible, right? So there's a fear in the ANC that Jacob Zuma may push through for the nuclear deal, as Ibrahim describes. Some even assume that he would push through certain boards onto certain state-owned enterprises through a proxy in the Ministry of Finance. So those are all likely things that the ANC wants to avoid, because Ace Magashule, the Secretary General's statement was very clear yesterday that the National Executive Council does not think Jacob Zuma has done anything wrong. They're not removing him because they think he's done anything wrong. But in the other instance, they speak about restoring the dignity of the party, the integrity of the party, and rebuilding the image. Surely someone must have eroded the integrity, dignity, and image of the party. So why are you then saying this person's done nothing wrong and then want to get rid of him? So there's a disingenuity in the ANC at the moment, and I think that's going to cause deep divisions within the ANC come to 2019 elections. More importantly, if this motion of no confidence passes, which remove Jacob Zuma, it certainly will remove Jacob Zuma. I think we can all, wave goodbye to Jacob Zuma right now. But what we must welcome is deeper divisions within the ANC, because people who want to maintain the favor and proximity they had to the presidency by being appointed as minister of a certain department, various ministries of certain departments, will now want to consolidate power outside of the Cyril Ramaphosa faction, particularly ministers who are currently ministers but aren't favorable to Cyril Ramaphosa.
Okay,
those ministers could include our Minister of Social Development, Batablet Dlamini.
Right. Interesting points. Ibrahim, is the ANC seemingly speaking with a forked tongue here because they are disingenuous, as Oliver says, or maybe they're just trying to be diplomatic in this process and not say too many mean things about the president, but push him out at the same time?
Look, we are dealing with a situation that has grown over the last decade and more. I think, secondly, the clean-up also involves raids on the Free State government offices. So I think what you need to do is to understand the systematic way the dominoes will fall. I have no doubt that once the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture happens, once the new Director of Public Prosecutions is in place, I think we will begin to see far more systematic things. And I think Oliver is right to maintain that kind of pressure for the ANC to remain a party of integrity and to put their deed to their word.
Right.
I think, secondly, it is very difficult for some people in the ANC to say an unequivocal message. Yesterday we heard that there was no time frame. Today we know that there is a deadline, that he must resign by tonight or face tomorrow. I think we're awaiting a second press conference or an address to the nation by the president. He may take the opportunity to resign in order not to be the subject of a vote of no confidence tomorrow. I also think that part of the urgency is that we need to get the country back on track economically. The rand is responding in a particular way. The investing market is responding in a particular way. But more importantly, our people have hope again for the first time. And so 2019's contests will be the ultimate test by the voting public. But I think that if you did a test on the optimism levels of South Africans are beginning to regain our sense of optimism. We must just guard against the undue euphoria and expectations that we can get things right in the shortest possible period of time. I want to add one last bit to it. I think that while in many of the institutions of the state and departments of the state, the top levels have been compromised, I am picking up that the middle and middle senior levels of the public service are now doing their job without fear of intimidation from the top levels imposed by the administration over the last decade. And that is why you can have the asset forfeiture unit suddenly producing the list of assets that must be forfeited by certain individuals. That's why charge sheets are coming out against certain individuals. That's why we have an arrest this morning. And so I think that there's enough evidence that the equivocation of the ANC in the past is giving way, even if there are still voices of equivocation that occupy senior seats. But the time will come as the dominoes fall.
Right. Oliver, do you feel the same level of optimism with regards to the future?
I think Ibrahim's conflating issues that have nothing to do with each other at the moment. The arrest, the raid on the Gupta premises this morning has nothing to do with the recall of Jacob Zuma. That's an arrest and a raid that would have happened anyway, because the Vrede Dairy Farm investigation has been ongoing for a couple of weeks now. So that was a natural process to happen anyway. Just because Jacob Zuma is being recalled on the same day the Gupta's homes were raided does not mean that governance is suddenly starting to happen. I think Ibrahim is naive to the fact how deep the rot has sank into the ANC. The ANC is at a point of irretrievable damage, at a point where corruption it doesn't just exist around Jacob Zuma. There are networks within the ANC unrelated to Jacob Zuma that are equally corrupt, equally looting from the state coffers, and who may not even come under the radar of investigators. So the Hawks may not even investigate them. The investigations may be thrown out on insufficient evidence. So I don't think the future is as optimistic as being painted out right now. I think we still have a long way to go. I think the ANC still has a lot to fix within itself before it can look to fix the rest of South Africa.
Ibrahim, usually it's the older guy telling the younger guy you're naive. Ibrahim, tell me why you disagree here with Oliver and you feel that Oliver's maybe being a bit too cynical. He says it's just a coincidence that there was a raid on the Gupta home on the day that the ANC had recalled Jacob Zuma.
Look, the simple test is, would this have happened under Jacob Zuma firmly in the seat, controlling both centers of power? I don't think so. And so it may not have been timed together, because that would be a conspiracy that the day he receives his letter of recall is the day when the Hawks strike on the Guptas. I don't think that that's what the constitutional state does. But I do believe that there is a coincidence in the confidence of law enforcement to take on impunity in this country. And he's absolutely right. This is a long haul. We must, and that's why I say we must guard against undue expectation and euphoria. I'm not asking for that. I'm simply saying that if we don't show the kind of optimism now, we will take the pressure on people and who believe that we can go on with a kind of pace of change and degeneration of the last 10 years. And we certainly must pick it up so that we can get back to dealing with the basic stuff of service delivery, of getting the economy growing, of making sure that there's equitable development across the length and breadth of our country. And I think that let's not predict the election result. Let's wait for that election result. I think certainly the ANC knows it has to work hard, that it has built a sentiment of positivity. We haven't regained the trust yet of people. It's still a wait and see. And that's the humble work that must be done by every ANC cadre, and that is what Cyril Ramaphosa, I am sure, is absolutely convinced by. He first has to win the trust before he can win the support of the South African public. He first has to win the trust of the international investor community before he can win the investments.
Oliver, does Cyril Ramaphosa have your trust?
Look, I would be very disingenuous if I were to separate Cyril Ramaphosa from the ANC and speak of it as though they are two different entities. I think the ANC has in large part lost the trust of South Africans. I think there are incredibly great administrators in the ANC who have the capacity and capability to regain the trust of South Africans. For instance, our Minister of Police has done an amazing job at cleaning up the Ministry of Police in a very short space of time. Our Minister of Finance went to Davos and spoke spoke with great confidence to investors and have secured quite a number of investment pockets for the country. So I do think there are amazing administrators within the ANC, but I do think that the infighting in the ANC certainly will continue for a longer time, and that may see them dip lower than the 62% in the next election that they currently have. The ANC only has 50% of South Africa's confidence if we were to use the numbers from our local government election 2 years ago. So importantly, you need to ask yourself, how much closer to 50% is the ANC going to drop? And if they drop below 50%, we may see a coalition government coming into, which may exist of opposition parties coming in 2019.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting.
A great possibility at this time.
Yeah, that would be really fascinating if, for example, the EFF on the sort of far left and the DA, which is kind of centrist, have to go into a coalition. That would be totally fascinating. That's why I stay in this business, because I'm looking forward to interesting news like that if it ever happens. Ibrahim, I want to look back for a moment before I leave you both, because I have to move on with the show here. But I want to look back for a second. The first time I met you, Ibrahim, you were South African ambassador to the United States. You've spoken about the rot that set in for a long, long time. And as somebody who was representing the country and someone who reported to President Jacob Zuma during that time when you were South African ambassador to the UN, was there any particular moment where you felt it became a moral crisis and it was becoming difficult for you to represent this country, or rather this country as run by this man?
I had the opportunity in the middle of my term to say to my superiors in international relations that when I sit in Washington and I represent South Africa at as an ambassador, that I represent a constitution, I represent a nation, I represent a vision and a cause, and I'm appointed by a president. And it comes because I think that when I was in the Western Cape and we went up to Polokwane, we were a province with a majority that voted against Jacob Zuma because we had certain misgivings about what he was standing for. So I knew what I was into, and I knew exactly who I was also, or what I was representing in the United States. And I dare say that that was a message that resonated across the US as we dealt with things. So I have no qualms about saying that.
Okay, Ibrahim Rasool and Oliver Dixon, I thank you both for joining us. Hope to have you again on the Newsmakers. It's been fascinating picking your brains. Thanks again. Still ahead on the Newsmakers, North Korea turning on the charm at the Winter Olympics. But many say it's more about propaganda than peace. And did charity donations go to paying for prostitutes in Haiti? We asked the head of their UK embassy what he makes of the allegations against Oxfam. Welcome back to the Newsmakers. Conditions at the Winter Olympics are pretty cold, but things have been warming up on the diplomatic front. North and South Korea, two nations still at war, have marched under the same flag and even competed on the same ice hockey team. And if that doesn't sound cozy enough, Kim Jong-un even sent his sister to the Pyeongchang Games as a sign of goodwill. But not everyone is convinced the intentions behind the charm offensive are genuine, especially American officials. So, is the Hermit Kingdom pushing for peace, or are relations still skating on thin ice? Vanessa Keneally reports.
A handshake with monumental significance. The sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un became the first member of the ruling family to cross the border since a war divided the country more than 6 decades ago. During her 3-day visit, 28-year-old Kim Yo-jong met South Korean President Moon Jae-in, as well as attending a concert and the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. There she supported the 20+ North Korean athletes, as well as the 200-strong troop of cheerleaders who grabbed headlines around the world. The elaborate show of unity continued on the ice as a team made up of women from both North and South Korea competed in an ice hockey match, which they lost but fans saw it as a huge win for diplomacy.
This is a God-given chance that we 70 million Korean people can be of one mind to support our team. I hope President Moon and his government has a very good opportunity to pave the way toward reunification.
But when it comes to peace, not everyone believes Pyongyang is going for gold.
I think Moon Jae-in's government fell for Kim Jong-un's trickery, which is using Kim Yo-jong's trip as a shield to hide its nuclear weapons.
It is very humiliating that Kim Yo-jong had lunch with Moon Jae-in, so we cannot accept it. We are very upset and we disagree with the Pyeongchang Olympics, which is organized by South Koreans. Now it has turned into the Pyongyang Olympics.
South Koreans aren't the only ones skeptical about Kim Jong-un's intentions. It was just a few months ago that he threatened to target Seoul and the US, and even fired an intercontinental ballistic missile close to Japan. It was that aggression which led to crippling sanctions, and is why some analysts believe Pyongyang is using the Olympic Games to try and convince its enemies it's turned over a new leaf. US Vice President Mike Pence, who attended the opening ceremony last week, also remains cautious, saying Washington is sticking to its maximum pressure campaign. But he did hint that if planned talks between North and South Korea go ahead after the Olympics, the US may consider a meeting. However, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is less trusting and is pushing for the annual US-South Korean military drills to go ahead, an event which enrages Pyongyang every year. But for now, in North Korea at least, Kim Jong-un is celebrating the success of his sister's historic trip to the south, while the world waits to see what the highly unpredictable leader will do next. Vanessa Keneally, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by Bruce Klingner. He was the CIA's Deputy Division Chief for Korea and is now a Senior Research Fellow of Korean and Japanese Affairs at the Heritage Foundation. Also in Washington, D.C. is Jenny Town. She's the Assistant Director of the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University. And in Augusta, in the U.S. state of Georgia, we have retired Professor Han Park. He's the Founding Director at the Center for the Study of Global Issues. I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers. Bruce, if I could begin with you, what we've seen in Pyeongchang, is it diplomatic brilliance from both sides, I guess, or is it just a bunch of puff that is distracting from the reality?
Well, it's a bit of both. It's certainly a charm offensive by North Korea. They're trying to drive a wedge between the U.S. and South Korea, but both Washington and Seoul are aware of that, so there's been very close coordination between the allies. There's been some speculation that the Trump administration has changed its policy towards the North, more open to dialogue. I think that's a bit of overinterpretation. I think the door's been open, but North Korea has been reluctant to engage in dialogue with the U.S.
Jenny Town, what have you made of the events in Pyeongchang? Are we seeing a shift in momentum when it comes to both North and South Korea and their relationship with each other, and also as we fold in the United States and Japan and others?
I think it's certainly a new opportunity that hasn't been there over the past few months. But I think it's very difficult to see how far this goes once we move from the actual sports diplomacy and symbolic nature of it to something more substantive, because on that substantive agenda are very difficult issues that do require more confidence from the international community, especially the United States, even for South Korea to move forward in those negotiations.
Mm-hmm. Han Park, Professor, are we just gonna see, after all this symbolism and goodwill, everything go back to business as usual, where the US and South Korea and Japan perhaps do their military drills, North Korea fires its rockets and pledges to annihilate all its enemies, and we're back to business as usual after a little bit of good news at the Winter Olympics? Is that how it's going to play out?
No, I think it will be, we are looking at a potentially major breakthrough in this regard. We have to look at South Korean government change. Very progressive government came in. Moon Jae-in used to be staff director for the Roh-moo-hyun, very progressive, I guess, pro-North, if you will, government. And in North Korea, Kim Jong-un's posture has changed completely from militarization to economic prosperity. So both situations, that North and South Korea, one people, one heritage, one language, and everything else, they're going to approach. Kim Jong-un invited South Korean president who accepted the invitation. So unless American objection, which I expect to be, there will be some dramatic development in inter-Korea relations.
Bruce, major breakthrough, according to Professor Park. I'm presuming you disagree.
I would disagree. The Olympics are a bit like going on vacation. There's a lot of feel-good. You pay for things that you might not buy otherwise. But then after a couple weeks, you go back to work and you realize all the responsibilities and the tensions are still there. So, you know, North Korea has said that its Myungjin policy is a continuation of a decision in the 1962 by Kim Il-sung to have guns and butter. What we see now, what's different, is that Kim Jong-un's willing to do a charm offensive, which his father used to do, and so far Jong-un has not done. But North Korean charm offensive tend to be a bit more offensive than charming.
Yeah. Jenny, I remember growing up in the 1980s in South Africa, they used to say, with regards boycotts, they used to say no normal sport in an abnormal society, and that was used as a reason for keeping South Africa out of the international fold. Is there a feeling that with this charm offensive and Kim Jong-un's sister, there's an element of normalizing the fact that, I guess, people might forget that this is still a totalitarian country with gulags? Has that happened in Pyeongchang?
I don't believe so. I don't think anyone is under the illusion that North Korea is now different. I tend to agree a little bit more with Bruce on this point that, you know, I don't think it was a major breakthrough. You know, I think it was an easy decision. So North Korea wanted to participate in the Olympics. South Korea wanted North Korea to participate in the Olympics. And so those easy issues are done now. And I think the big flashpoints and the big key points to look for now in the very near future is what happens after the Olympics, what happens when there resumption of U.S. ROK military exercises, how does North Korea respond to that? And I think that will be the real test of how much we actually accomplished by having North Korea participate in these Olympics.
Mm-hmm. Han Park, beyond that symbolism of the two Koreas marching together and folded into one of the teams, I think it was, if I'm correct, the ice hockey team, yes, and you know, under the United Korean flag. So beyond that symbolism, would you agree with the other two that the real hard work actually begins now? Pyeongchang wasn't the hard work begins after Pyeongchang.
I agree with them. The hard work here is the question of complete denuclearization of North Korea. In my view, maybe the other panelists will disagree with me, and that is, we waited too long. North Korea is already a de facto nuclear state. How can we denuclearize North Korea? How can you have verification and irreversible kind of denuclearization? North Korea has bombs, so many bombs, I don't know how many, but delivery system tested over and over again. We're still talking about Washington is denuclearization of North Korea. It will not work.
Right. Okay. So, Bruce, would Washington ever be prepared to accept that? It, over the years, has accepted a nuclear China, a nuclear Russia, a nuclear India, a nuclear Pakistan, Israel, you name it. Does it need to change its policy and say, okay, keep your nukes, but now let's find a different way?
No, we'll assess that North Korea is a nuclear state, but we won't accept North Korea as a nuclear state. You know, advocates of engagement in the beginning would say North Korea was not building a nuclear weapons program, and then it became obvious they were. Then it was that they were building a very expensive bargaining chip. They were building it simply to give it away, and now it tends to shift to, well, we can't get them to do what they promised to do in 8 international agreements, so let's try something with a far fewer requirements. So I think the U.S. and the international community are saying that North Korea has violated previous agreements, that it's in defiance right now of any number of UN resolutions. So the time is for pressure, and really punishment for repeatedly defying the international community.
Right. With this thaw, Jenny, is Moon Jae-in perhaps maybe isolating a big part of his own country and also the Americans and the Japanese by maybe conceding too much to the North so early on?
I think there is a real sense that Moon Jae-in did give too much during the Olympics. The idea that you have a unified team, the idea that you would have a unified hockey team, for instance, at the expense of South Korean athletes. There's real divided opinion in South Korea about how to interpret this message, especially as you get into the younger generations and especially as you get into conservatives versus liberals. So while there is a faction, of society, especially of the older generation and the liberal generation, that really saw that as a very special moment, there are a lot of, especially the young people, who are really not sold on this idea. And the idea that, South Korean government paid for the North Korean to attend in such a large number and really stole a lot of the attention away from what should have been a shining moment for South Korean national pride as the host of the Olympics. And so they are going to expect something in return. And I think there's a lot of pressure on Moon Jae-in now to deliver on that from North Korea, to have some kind of mitigation of responses of U.S. ROK military exercises and some other measures going forward in order to justify the actions that he's taken.
Han Park, does Moon Jae-in now have to actually, does he have to conduct those drills with the U.S. and the Japanese in order to kind of balance what he's just done in the past week?
I think Moon Jae-in, we have to read correctly. This guy has always been, throughout his life, democratic activist and anti-conservative and pro-North Korea. So he's in power. Probably he will try to do something drastically different from early administrations. So we have to realize that South Korea is, fortunately, a democratic state. People rule. People's sentiment on the question of reunification is tremendously emotional and high, as witnessed by the way North Koreans were received in the last couple months, couple of weeks. So in this situation, Moon Jae-in will be moved toward reconciliation with North Korea. It may not be approved by Washington or Japan, but it doesn't matter. That otherwise, South Korean people will rebel against the Moon Jae-in government too.
Right.
So we've got to realize that democracy.
Okay, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point. You're saying he's different from the others. Let me ask you then, Bruce. Everybody's been trying to solve this riddle for decades, and maybe it takes someone like Moon Jae-in to bend over backwards without getting anything in return from the North early on. Maybe it takes another visit from Dennis Rodman or, all the symbolism of the Olympics, and not guys from the Pentagon or guys with a PhD from Georgetown to fix this issue. Maybe this is what it takes with North Korea. Is that possible?
Well, we've been down this path many times. Remember the euphoria following the Sydney Olympics when they, again, walked in with behind a unification flag. That time there was a secret payment demanded by the North, which the South paid. There was a demand that the South Koreans not outnumber the North Korean team. So you had 350 South Korean athletes sitting out in the parking lot. They couldn't march in. And then we've had any number of other cultural and sporting events. We've had the 2000 and 2007 summits, and it didn't lead to a change in North Korean behavior. So Moon Jae-in, the administration has already committed that the military exercises are simply postponed. They're not canceled. Senior Korean officials told me that in Seoul 2 weeks ago. So, and really the military situation has not changed. The North Korean threat has not changed. So, we've had a few nice photo ops with the Olympics. We've had certainly a very important trip by Kim's sister. but she didn't indicate that North Korea was willing to abide by resolutions and international law and U.S. law. So they're really just trying to maintain their same policy, but wean South Korea away from the U.S.
Right. Jenny, what is the possibility of North Korea being willing to abide by any of the UN resolutions or willing to bend in any way?
I tend to agree. I don't think we're going to see a big attitude change from North Korea. I think that, again, this is a potential opportunity to try and change the way that we approach them and the narrative. But, it's too early to tell whether or not it's going to mean anything. And again, if North Korea, for instance, starts to test ballistic missiles in response to the military exercises, all of this goodwill and all of this, opening is really going to close very quickly, and we will end up reverting back to that path. So if this Olympics diplomacy is going to mean anything, it's really going to have to address those issues very quickly as to how do we get North Korea to not respond to the military exercises and to stop testing and to leave a window open for further diplomacy.
Okay, Han Park, final response on this panel, sir. In less than 30 seconds, please tell me why you're still optimistic.
Yeah, I think the change is going to be coming from Washington as well. Right now, Washington's policy is very uncertain. In 1994, we could have made a great stride, but we, the United States, were unable to deliver the terms of agreement, that is crude oil delivery and light water reactor construction. All these things, we couldn't do it. So North Koreans were just as upset as we were. So we have to look at, I'm a scholar, more objectively, fair-mindedly representing rather than representing a country. I like to see peace workers as mediating. Like South Korea can be a mediator for U.S.-North Korea rapprochement.
Okay.
There has to be dialogue. There has to be dialogue. Washington and Pyongyang.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that. There has to be dialogue. Where that ends up, well, we don't know. We'll wait and see. We'll watch it closely. Han Park, Bruce Klingner, and Jenny Town, I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Many of us will have seen one of Oxfam's heart-wrenching appeals to help those less fortunate. We may even have donated a little cash. But was that money well spent? It's now emerged that senior staff hired prostitutes in Haiti while delivering aid, and the charity allegedly covered it up. The scandal has forced Oxfam's deputy chief executive to resign, and the British government is threatening to cut its funding. And to make matters worse, its chairman has just been arrested over corruption in Guatemala. So, could the charity be doing more harm than good? In a moment, I'll ask Haiti's Charge d'Affaires in the UK what he thinks. But first, here's Christine Pirovalakis.
Oxfam, one of Britain's biggest charities, is at the center of a sex scandal. Oxfam's deputy chief executive has resigned, and it stands to lose millions of dollars in government funding. That's after some of its senior staff allegedly used sex workers in Haiti after a devastating earthquake in 2010.
What those few privileged men in Haiti did was to betray the trust of our supporters, our donors, and to betray the thousands of hardworking Oxfam staff who put themselves out, risk their lives to do this work of saving people's lives, children's lives.
Oxfam says it looked into the allegations in 2011 and fired 4 of its staff. 3 others resigned before the investigation was completed. The charity says allegations that underage girls were paid for sex are unproven, and there's no evidence money donated to Oxfam was used.
It is clear it's a cover-up case. The fact that those folks were allowed to leave the country without any punishment, without even informing relevant Haitian authorities about that, it was a cover-up.
It's not the first time Oxfam has faced accusations of sexual misconduct. Similar allegations were made against Oxfam staff members in Chad more than a decade ago. And just last year, 120 employees from some of Britain's leading charities were accused of sexual abuse. 87 were from Oxfam. Founded more than 75 years ago, Oxfam is one of the biggest charities the British government assists financially to carry out humanitarian and economic development projects around the world. It was among several private and governmental aid groups that mobilized in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake hit the country, killing between 200,000 and 300,000 people and leaving millions homeless. But such relief efforts have long been tarnished by charges of misconduct, including reports of money being misspent and using misleading fundraising tactics. If Oxfam refuses to comply with a new British government review into the work of charities overseas, it could cost it millions of dollars in government cash.
If the moral leadership at the top of the organisation isn't there, then we cannot have you as a partner.
Around 45% of the $565 million the charity received last year came from governments, the European Commission and the United Nations. It received $44 million from the British government, and $150 million came from donations, and $125 million from sales in its shops. And while other major charities like Save the Children and the British Red Cross will also have to face scrutiny under this review, a break in its relations with the government would be a serious blow to Oxfam. And it could lead to many wondering whether the way that international aid is administered should change. Christine Pirovolakis, The Newsmakers.
Well, we invited Oxfam onto the show and they declined our request. But I'm now joined from London by Ambassador Boshi Edmond. He's the Charge d'Affaires at the Haitian Embassy in the UK. Let me ask you, were you shocked at these allegations that came out in the Times report? And they seem to be more than allegations because they've had a tremendous ripple.
Not only me, I was shocked, but the country was shocked. Because Oxfam is one of the well-respected NGOs in Haiti. So to find out that thing was happening, and unfortunately it was not reported to the law enforcement authorities, it's really a shame. And then there was that all those work to cover up what happened and to protect the guy who committed the crime and allow him to leave the country without any punishment, and later on gave him a letter of recommendation to go to work somewhere else. So it's a series of really events that's really unfortunate, and hopefully they will step up to the plate and then correct what needs to be corrected. Yeah,
they say they want to restore trust. How can they restore trust in your eyes?
The first step there are two first steps that have to be taken. The first one is they have to make a public apology to Haiti, and secondly, they will have to cooperate, as they promised to the British government, to cooperate with the Haitian authorities, the Haitian legal system, and so we can get access to all those files and then push those who committed those crimes to to take them to justice.
Do you think that it's as simple as them using aid money to frequent or use prostitutes, or that there might be something more to it, maybe a sort of element of coercion and dependency, where perhaps some Haitian women don't want to get involved in prostitution, and they've been sucked into this vortex and this dependency with the aid agency?
Yeah, possibly it's something different than that. My take on this could be two things. I believe, firstly, we might be dealing with a pedophile ring because we believe there were some underage girls involved. And secondly, the fact that those foreigners arrive in a very difficult moment after earthquake, and people are vulnerable. And certainly those young girls and young boys, they're going to be very easy target. And that's why we always recommend to those people, those organizations, whenever they are, recruiting those people, they need to find out, they need to have a deeper background check on them. Because after he left Oxfam, I believe he went to work for more than 2 other organizations. Mm-hmm. Therefore, there is a lack of screening of his past.
Right.
This is one of the things they need to correct now, is to have a deeper background search so they can really know who they are recruiting.
Right. Something that I didn't read in any of the media reports was that the suggestion that any of the girls were underage. So I just want to be absolutely certain. I know you're meeting them very soon, so I'm assuming you're going to bring this up with Oxfam. Is there enough evidence in what you've seen that there might be underage girls and that we might be dealing with a pedophile ring? Because that jumped out at me.
We might have it, I believe, because remember in the report there was some parties going on, sexual parties. Young girls were involved. But the first question I would ask, if someone tell me that there were no underage girls, but I will ask you, how do you know? Mm-hmm. Did you ask them for their IDs? You cannot know that, because what we are talking about now is this should not have happened, because you went to the country on a mission to help, not to sexually exploit young girls and young boys. That's what I would say.
And for Haitians who seem to be losing trust, I guess, in aid agencies, is Oxfam just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, because there have been all these multiple scandals over the years, right? So you have reconstruction money that doesn't reach Haitians. You have Haitians not trusting peacekeepers, whether it comes to sex crimes or getting cholera from them, right? So, for example, there's all these things. Are we in a situation where Haitians are losing trust in those who claim to want to help them?
Yes, it is unfortunate, but it seems to be we are heading to that path. But hopefully those organizations will do what they have to do in terms of taking responsibility for what happened, and in terms of reconstructing that trust, because it's really important. As I always said to them, whenever I meet them, as much as aid is important, is necessary, but aid cannot replace the respect and protection of human dignity. Even though you're coming to help, but you're coming to those people you are coming to help, they also have rights. They have to be respected. Very, very well put. Ambassador Bokshi Edmund, I thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, it's 10 years since Kosovo declared independence, but our renewed tensions with Serbia making the country more fragile than ever. Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.